George Pickens made his first ever Pro Bowl. We'll tell you that's going to impact his situation with Dallas next.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us the number one sports podcast network. And today's episode is sponsored by Prize Picks. Download the Prize Picks app today. Use promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. That is Landon McCool. And on today's show, we're going to talk about this Cowboys-Commanders game on Christmas Day. We'll talk about some players that we are excited to watch on both sides of the ball. But I want to start with the Pro Bowl honors that were announced on Tuesday. It was your usual cast of characters that made it for the Cowboys. Dak Prescott. We had Tyler Smith. There was Brandon Aubrey. Quinnen Williams made it despite not playing a ton of games this year because of an injury and also because of having 2 bye weeks. But he made it. The more notable one was George Pickens, who I honestly wasn't quite sure if he was going to make it because of how loaded the NFL is at wide receiver and really how loaded the NFC is. But he made it. So I want your thoughts, first of all, on his Pro Bowl season. And do you think this makes him more likely or less likely to stay in Dallas?
I'll answer the latter first. I don't think it really affects the outcome of him staying in Dallas. I think that's kind of been signed and sealed. I think unless some kind of trade is made or some sort of assets reaped for that situation, I think the Cowboys sounds like they're pretty committed to this whole situation with the Pickens. So I imagine that was kind of done deal even before this announcement. I do think it's cool for Pickens, right? Like and
Really cool.
it's not terribly shocking because of just the raw production numbers that you've seen from him. He certainly has earned it. It certainly isn't surprising in the in the reward aspect of it. I think it's more like the kind of politicking that can go around getting up your first Pro Bowl berth that sometimes you usually have to wait a year after having a Pro Bowl season. So I do think it was a little bit surprising just because of the reason that you said that the league is already filled with wide receivers, specifically NFC players that are really, really good. And so it was great that that Pickens broke through. I think he got a little bit of Cowboys bump, which, again, may help with him re-signing with the Cowboys. Who knows?
So first of all, on his season, if you just go by numbers, he's actually been wildly consistent, which has always been the big knock on George Pickens.
Yeah.
He only had 4 games this year under 68 receiving yards. It's week 1 against Philadelphia, but he drew 2 big pass interference calls. He had the game against the Lions that was really bad. They had the game against the Vikings, and then he had a game against the Jets where he had 2 targets, but he had 2 catches for 57 yards and a touchdown. Like week in and week out, he's been very, very consistent. And if you care about PFF grades, PFF uses the number 60 as considered like an average game. He's only had 2 sub 60 graded games this year, week 1 against the Eagles and then the game against the Lions. This is everything you could have ever hoped for with George Pickens. Like he's put it all together. He's having a career season and landed like there's a chance he gets to like 1,500 receiving yards and 12 touchdowns this year, which is wild considering there's been weeks where he's not even the best receiver on this team.
Well, it's also wild because everyone still manages to talk about him like he's a malcontent. The 1 or 2 seasons where he doesn't manage to have outrageous production because that's the thing. Like, he's far exceeded our expectations here, as a whole from the season. So like whenever there's a slip up, it just feels like people are kind of just waiting for that to say something. But I mean, he's been incredible, like to the point where, he's had a better season than CeeDee Lamb, which is certainly not what our expectations were. I don't know if that means he's the number 1 wide receiver or if he's the better wide receiver.
Because CeeDee's over 1,000 yards and he missed 4 games.
Yeah, so it's not like both of these guys are getting a lot of targets and a lot of opportunity, and they're cashing in a lot of ways. So, I think it it certainly is good to see him get in there and get the recognition, especially over a lot of the noise about, the way he played in one particular game when he's been, like you said, consistently good throughout the season.
So I think there's not a chance. I do think this is going to raise his price tag whenever he gets a long-term deal, whether it's this year or next year. I still think the Cowboys are inclined just to let him play out on the franchise tag this year or next year because it's so favorable on the books. But at the same time, I think Pickens has to know. And if I were his agent, I know I'm not, and I know that the job of the agent isn't necessarily to get you in the best situation. It's to get you the most money. But man, look at this spot for Pickens, right? He's going to have 1,500 yards. He's going to catch double-digit touchdowns. He might have more touchdowns this season than he had in his first 3 years combined. I would not be anxious to leave this spot for a lesser spot for a little bit more money because in Dallas you can put up big numbers every single year. Again, maybe that's the fan in me trying to will Pickens back to Dallas, but I also think it just makes logical sense. Like, don't leave a good situation for a little bit more money.
Well, I mean, I think that's the benefit that the Cowboys are going to reap from him being in the Pittsburgh situation, right? Is that he knows more than most that maybe the grass is not always greener on the other side. Now,
well, and he actually talked about it on Tuesday. He talked about I've been in some different situations and on some 30 visits, and he said it's different here, and I like the culture here.
Yeah, and those are the kind of things you like to hear, obviously, if you want to re-sign him. But I think, specifically, he knows that even if he likes the situation, if he isn't in a place where there's a quarterback that can get him the ball consistently, then he's not going to be happy. And he clearly wasn't happy in Pittsburgh, and Pittsburgh clearly wasn't happy with him. So, yeah, I do think he understands that match is a big part of this. And if you can get, that kind of match plus the money that you would, close to the money that you would get in the open market, I think that may be worth it because I think it also provides you more opportunity to get more money later, right? Like if you go to a situation where it's bad and then suddenly your production's down again, you may not get that extra bite at the apple that you would get if you were here with the Cowboys and producing.
Last thing on the Pro Bowl, was there anybody that you felt like was snubbed from the Cowboys? I think the only critique I had is I think Tyler Smith maybe got in a little bit based on name in previous seasons because I thought there were some other guards in the NFC that were better, including like Joe Thuney, Chris Lindstrom, Kevin Dotson, but that's my only knock.
Yeah, I mean, look, certainly Tyler Smith had a down year because I think the kind of injury that he was dealing with throughout the year, and I think the CeeDee Lamb situation. Look, he was injured for a good portion of the year. It's just going to affect that. So I think he's had a Pro Bowl type season. I just think
there's only 4 spots, so it's Puka. It's Jackson Smith and Jigba, who are both like on record-setting pace. There's Amon-Ra St. Brown, who's having an awesome year, and there's George Pickens. CeeDee's been great, but he hasn't been better than any of those 4.
Yeah, so maybe he gets a consideration if someone drops out, right? But I'm sure he'll end up dropping out too. So, I think outside of that, like I feel like those are really the guys that kind of deserve it as season wide. You've seen a couple guys that have had a couple of bursts here and there, but as far as consistency, that's probably the group that deserves to be in.
All right, let's talk about this Cowboys-Commanders game that's happening on Christmas Day. Listen, we know the final outcome isn't the most important thing. Well, unless you care about tanking and trying to get a better draft pick. Then yes, it is important. But we're going to talk about some players that we are excited to watch on both sides of the ball. We'll get to that next. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. The holiday season is one of the best time for sports. Bowl games, big basketball matchups, playoff pushes, and it's all happening at once. And while we're all making choices every day, one of the most fun places to make the right call is Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the easiest way to get in on daily fantasy. You just pick more or less on at least 2 player projections, lock in your lineup, and you're in the game. It's simple, it's fast, and it's available in 45 states, including California, Texas, Florida, and Georgia. And Prize Picks has added an extra layer of excitement to the holiday sports schedule. Just think about it. We're going to have 3 football games on Christmas Day. We're going to have basketball games. We've got bowl games later in the week. We've got even more NFL football on Saturdays. You're just going to be loaded up with games all week long. So download the Prize Picks app today. Use promo code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. That is code LOCKEDONNFL to get $50 in lineups after you play your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, it's good to be right. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen every single day. We'd also like to thank you for making us the #1 sports podcast network. If you haven't already, go check out the Everydayer Club. You're going to get ad-free episodes to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. You're going to get some great merch that's 15% off. You can go check that out. You're going to get access to a Discord where you can come chat with us during the games. It's all available for just $5 a month or $50 a year. Go to lockedoncowboys.supercast.com or check out the link in the show notes. All right, Landon, let's talk about this Cowboys-Commander game. But we'll talk about who we think wins and some of that stuff later. But who are some under-the-radar players that you're going to be paying extra attention to this week?
He's limited in practice so far this week, but I hope he plays because I would like to continue to see a little bit more of Flournoy. I just think that he's been on such a tear these last few weeks, and it's not even that I necessarily need him to prove anything else. I just wanted to see him continue to grow and get opportunities, and I think this is going to be a situation where you don't want to like overextend your two superstar wide receivers. You certainly don't want anybody to get injured at the end of the year. So I think Flournoy is going to get lots of opportunities to kind of catch some passes and kind of maybe be a leader in this passing attack a little bit as they kind of try to trend away from the other guys. So he's certainly a guy that's on my list right away and that I'm going to be checking out early in the game.
Yeah, so he was a DNP during the Tuesday practice, which isn't a great sign for his availability. And maybe the Cowboys exercise some caution here, especially, and you mentioned this on the squad show, that field in Washington is awful. So maybe you give him 10 more days to get ready for week 18. And maybe that opens up some more snaps for like Jonathan Mingo, who at this point, I don't know if he's a lock to be on the roster in 2026. I mean, he's got a year left on his contract, but he's shown nothing so far that suggests that he should be on this team.
Well, it'll be interesting to see, right? Like, I mean, you're not going to have Tolbert, I think, at the end of the year, so it's just one less guy to kind of crowd that wide receiver room. I wonder if they don't just give him one more year just because they have him under contract, just to see what they can do, because it does feel like the hierarchy at obviously the first three spots, and then what you get with Turpin is kind of locked in at this point. So yeah, I think Mingo is another guy that is going to probably have some opportunity here to do some things. So we'll see how that plays out in the course of the game. Again, if they start to kind of pull back on these star guys, maybe you'll see Mingo gets more opportunities, especially if Flournoy doesn't end up playing because of the knee situation.
I'm going to be curious about the tight end situation. Jake Ferguson's pretty clearly dealing with a calf injury right now. He's not had a strong year by any stretch. Maybe we see more of Brevyn Spann-Ford, and honestly, I would like to see him even more involved in the passing game. See him on some shots up the seam. See what he can do in the passing game, because he's really been limited only to a blocker this year. But man, every time he's out on the field, he produces really, really good, good production. I would love to see more of him.
Yeah. And, I don't know that we're going to see a different running back rotation, but I would love to see, more of, Malik Davis. I would just like to see Jamal Williams. I keep saying that. Devontae Williams, get some more opportunities to kind of get some time on the bench, because again, I don't want him injured, but also because I kind of want to see what, I would love if they would surprise us and, put in Phil Maffa, make him active for this game. I just think that I'd love to see more opportunities for these younger guys. If Blue isn't going to be on the field, more opportunities for different running backs. I think that would be good. Just, preserve your guys, and also just to see what you've got, because you are going to need to have a second running back on this team next year.
Do you think Jaden Blue gets another carry before the season is over?
I don't know. Look, it's clear at this point, if you're not making him active, then man, it really feels like you probably aren't. And Coach, Stretch brought it up on our squad show, right? It's like, if you can't trust the guy to pick up a blitz, then anytime that Dak is in the game, like, how do you put Blue in the game? It's a protection issue. That's the issue with trying to rotate in guys on the offensive side of the ball. Like you don't want to get anybody hurt.
Yeah. On defense, I don't know if this guy's going to play, but I love what I saw from Perrion Winfrey last week against the
Yeah.
Chargers. I know that's a weak offensive line, and I know Perrion's got fresh legs, and I'm sure that contributed to a little bit. But I saw somebody who was long, athletic, played with some power, got up and down the line a little bit. And this Washington offensive line is pretty banged up as well. This feels like another game that he could have some success. We don't know about the status of Quinnen Williams. He's been dealing with a neck injury. I would assume even if he plays, maybe they're going to limit his snaps. I would just love to see Perrion some more, whether it's, at the expense of a defensive end, or maybe you cut Solomon Thomas's snaps down a little bit. Winfrey is a guy that, if he shows enough over the next 2 weeks, maybe you can make some, adjustments or trades in this defensive tackle room and you'll be okay.
Yeah. I mean, I think you saw some good things, like you said. Let's see some more good things. I mean, that kind of description of what you said, heavy-handed guy, plays up and down the defensive line, plays with some strength and some explosiveness. That's what we saw in training camp as well. Like, just a guy that was surprisingly better athlete than you expected, heavy-handed guy that was throwing his weight around a little bit, which is good to see. So yeah, and that's what you saw in real life NFL snaps. Now, again, I think the Chargers offensive line was a little bit beat up and also a little bit not good. And then the Washington situation is probably pretty similar, or at least more banged up than not good, because they have one of the better running games in the NFL, right? So I do think that opportunity for these defensive tackles, especially in a game where you have, I wouldn't even call this a third string quarterback. I would call this a quarterback that you found in your shoe drawer. I think that they're going to want to run the football. Yeah, exactly. That they're going to want to run the football. So I think having more fresh defensive tackles, especially with Quinnen Williams dealing with the situation with his neck, I think is probably a good idea.
I want to ask you about another player, Reddy Stewart. He's actually played a lot of snaps this year for the Cowboys. He's at like 400 snaps. We really haven't talked about him at all this season. But what's kind of the long-term outlook for Reddy Stewart? Because this is somebody the Cowboys acquired right before the season started. He was a draft pick in 2024. Is there any chance he could be something for this team down the road?
I think, I wouldn't necessarily kick him off the squad, but I also think that he is a replaceable starter. I don't think that he's a guy that I want as my starting nickel, but man, I'd love him as my backup nickel. I think he's shown you enough steadiness that he's not going to necessarily get you killed out there. But I don't know that there's a lot of playmaking there. I think another guy that I would also like to see play in that same kind of spot, not the nickel, but outside, is and we mentioned him on the show, Chikwueze Bridges. I think he played some good football when he was able to get in. He's been up and down. You've seen him at times and he looked good, and there's been times when he goes out there and he gets burned to a crisp. So I think he's still kind of figuring it out. I mean, this is a guy who was a late round pick. I think he's still a rookie, right? This is he's rookie year.
Yeah, he's a rookie.
So,
yep.
Yeah, so I mean, this is a guy that I think has shown you enough that we don't talk about, because he was a trade in a 7th round pick, so, or I think they signed him off waivers, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And I think that he's shown you enough to be interested in continuing to see him play, and if he continues to play well these next few weeks, maybe you bring him back, depending on what the defensive coordinator situation is.
One more player that I wanted to mention, that's Savon Ravel. I just would like to see him make one big splash play. It's been really rough for him over the last couple of weeks, and everything is explainable, right? He rushed back from an injury. He's a small school defensive back making the jump to the NFL. He's playing on a team that doesn't have a pass rush, but he's struggling. It would be nice for his confidence kind of going into the offseason to make a big play, get a third down stop, pick off a ball, force a fumble, make a big stop with the run game. He got beat on a couple of just awesome throws by Justin Herbert last week, including one in the back of the end zone. I just think for his confidence, it would be really nice to see him have a strong game to close out the year.
Yeah, and that's what I was going to say is I think outside of the missed tackle thing, which he needs to clean up a little bit, I think his technique has been pretty good. Like, in times in man coverage, he's there. His body positioning is correct, and like you said, he got beat by a great pass, and that's going to happen sometimes. But I also agree with you. I think he needs to make a play for himself, right? For his confidence, he needs to have a big pass deflection. He needs to have an interception or force a fumble. I think this is a guy who. I'm okay with it where his trajectory is right now. It's because of all the things you talked about, right? Like the circumstances there. The Cowboys obviously were desperate, which is why they were desperate to get him out there and have him play at all, just because they literally needed bodies who know how to play cornerback. But I think that this has been him taking his lumps, which he needs to do, which every NFL cornerback needs to go through. So it's better than him not playing at all this season. But you're right. Savon Ravel getting those snaps is really, really important to the long-term health of his play. I have certainly not given up on him, but I think that having him kind of produce a big play will, I think, help him reach that next level. He'll get that confidence and then start playing with better confidence. And then that obviously helps you down the road as well.
And sometimes that's all you need is that one play to kind of carry you through the next 6-7 months. So we'll see if Ravel can do that here, either against the Commanders or against the Giants to finish out the season. All right, Landon, let's talk about this game on Christmas Day, Week 17, Cowboys-Commanders. We'll get to that next. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen every single day. Landon, let's talk about this this Cowboys-Commanders game. The Cowboys are currently 7-point road favorites against the Commanders. As of right now, the expectation is that Josh Johnson, 39-year-old Josh Johnson, is going to be starting this game. Washington has a bunch of injuries. They've been not very competitive the last couple of weeks, kind of laid down in the fourth quarter against Philadelphia. What do you expect from Dan Quinn's squad in this one?
Well, I don't expect 39-year-old Josh Johnson to play at the level of 44-year-old Phillip Rivers, which I have to tell you was quite a thing to witness.
Fun to watch.
It really, really was. I think it's a situation where Josh Johnson was probably signed because he has a little bit of athleticism in his game, even though he's 39 years old. I'm laughing as I'm saying this, but it's true. I mean, I think that's how he plays the game a little bit. He likes to get out on the perimeter and likes to throw the football, and they already have a very well-developed run game. So I imagine they kind of fold in some QB run stuff just to give him the opportunity to get out on the edge and not necessarily have to operate from a pocket behind an offensive line that's beat up a little bit, and just get him the opportunity to get on the move and throw the football. It's not exactly a terrifying defense to throw into. So I think that, they're going to probably want to run the football, they're definitely going to establish the run with a capital E and capital T, capital R, and then try to build their passing game off the play action off of that. And then, it's a Cliff Kingsbury situation. So they'll expect a lot of screens, expect a lot of short passes as part of the run game as well. Efficient stuff. Not a bunch of deep shots down the field, but they probably won't need to do that because they'll probably be able to efficiently move the ball and be successful against this Dallas defense.
And on the other side of the ball, the Cowboys have a massive advantage against this Washington defense. They're incredibly banged up on the defensive line in the secondary. They're two linebackers, Frankie Louvu, Bobby Wagner, both really struggling this year. I think the only concern is the field, right? Like, could that be an issue? But in terms of matchups, the Cowboys have every single matchup that you get to hope for on that side of the ball. But I wanted to ask you this, and I'm not talking about the Cowboys. I'm talking about you as a fan. How are you rooting in this game? Because I know there's going to be some fans out there rooting for the Cowboys to lose because a loss could mean that they move, up 2 or 3, maybe even 4 draft picks. But I also don't want to have a 4-game losing streak kind of going into Week 18. So, and I know it's very complicated, but how are you rooting in this game?
I personally, like, I modularize it because I can't just, like, you have to compartmentalize your feelings on this, because to me, I want to see certain players play well, like we've talked about. I want to see certain things. I don't want to lose at the expense of promoting losing culture. right? Like playing like losers. So if they lose in the course of playing the game or by strategically subbing guys out at key moments or that sort of thing, I think that makes a lot of sense. If they win, it at least it promotes the kind of it fights back the losing culture, which again I think is a real thing, and that's ultimately you're trying to save this team for 2026. So whether that's injury or that's a vibe of losing that you don't want to let sink in, you have to avoid ruining 2026 in these last two games by something happening.
I think the Cowboys are going to win the next two games. I really do. And I think I wouldn't be surprised if they blow out the Commanders and the Giants, because Dak is really good against the division and these teams are really bad. And the truth is, the two losses and the two wins probably aren't going to change their draft spots that much. Like, even if they were to win both these games, they're probably going to be drafting around 16 or so. And if they lose the two games, maybe you're drafting at 12. And that is a difference. Don't get me wrong. It is a difference. But I don't know if it's that big of a difference. And I don't think in this draft, which we'll get to here in a couple of weeks, isn't that big of a deal. There's part of me that would like to see them just play well, win a game on Christmas. We'll celebrate it. We'll have some fun things to talk about for the next 10 days. And then we'll focus in the offseason. I want them to win. I want them to play well, and we'll worry about the draft stuff later.
Yeah, I think that's the only way you can really handle it. Especially with the holidays, you try to just make peace with either outcome and just be okay with it, so that you're not ruining Christmas for the rest of your family because you threw your cowboy shaped mug out a window because they didn't score enough touchdowns.
Bingo. All right, that is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every single day. If you need a last-minute holiday gift and you're really waiting to the last minute, make it easy. Ask for the Everydayer Club. Ad-free episodes of the show, exclusive Discord server access, and more. And subscriptions can be gifted through the lockedoncowboys.supercast.com link. And for those of you on video, we can send you the first ever 24/7 national NBA YouTube channel. And for your audio, make your second listen the Locked On NFL podcast. Follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I am at Marcus_Mosher. Enjoy your Christmas. Enjoy the game. And we'll see you guys right back here on Friday.